into the book, and by the way, last night we had a question from a young lady in the back. She was holding her little baby, you remember, on this book. So let's go through this book in a little bit more detail. Here are some philosophical problems with the book. Here's what Hawking says, and before I put that up here, let me point this. One thing I like about Hawking is that he tells you exactly where he's coming from. He does not beat around the bush, he just says it in plain English. Here's what he says on page 34. This book is rooted in the concept of scientific determinism, which implies that there are no miracles or exceptions to the laws of nature. Now, what is scientific determinism? The lady here last night stated it very well. Hawking was saying, that every cause in the world, in the universe, is the product of a prior natural event. So there are no miracles, there are no exceptions to this. Everything is just a product of a previous natural event. Okay, that's called scientific determinism. What does that imply? First of all, this is a philosophical assertion, not a scientific conclusion. It begs the question in favor of atheism. Do you see that this is a philosophical conclusion he makes here? He can't learn this by doing some sort of experiment. This is not a scientific conclusion. This is a philosophical presupposition. He says, scientific determinism is true, therefore there are no miracles, therefore atheism is true. How does he know this? Because he said so. That's it. I just said so. It's an assertion. There's no evidence for this. This is just a philosophical assertion. That's why I said last night, science doesn't say anything, scientists do. And if you're not good at philosophy, you may come up with bad scientific conclusions. And this book that Hawking has written is just loaded with philosophical presuppositions that he can't prove. Atheistic philosophical presuppositions. Suppose some Christian said, miracles do occur, in fact they happen all the time, and then you ask the Christian why, and he just says, because I said so. You'd say, well, what do you mean? Because that's an assertion. I need some evidence. He has no evidence for this. This is just what he says. Secondly, this also means that Hawking's thoughts in this book are determined. In other words, we have no reason to believe they are true. If every effect in the universe is a product of a previous natural cause, then so are his thoughts. His thoughts are the product of a previous natural cause, which means we have no free will, which means he's not really reasoning. What's he doing? He's simply a product of previous natural causes. He doesn't have free will. He's not really thinking. These thoughts are just coming to him because of some brain chemistry going on here. He's just molecules in motion. If that's the case, why should we believe what he says? This is what some might say a universal acid that burns everything up. It burns its own theory up. To say determinism is true is to say, well, how did I come to the conclusion that determinism is true? Because I had a previous natural cause it in my mind. Well, how would I know then what I'm really believing is true then? You wouldn't. So he's just given up the entire show here by saying this. How can you be a scientist? How can you discover truth if this is the case? You can't. In fact, he says it on page 32. Free will is just an illusion. If free will is just an illusion, then so are his thoughts in this book, aren't they? This is a dream, basically. Well, why should we believe it then? Do you see why you can't do science unless you know philosophy? These are all philosophical assertions, and if you don't pick them out, you're going to be, wow, how do I deal with Hawking when he gets to the end and he says, there's no God? If you don't know philosophy, you won't be able to pick this out. Now he says that he asks a question here, and you're not going to believe, well, maybe you will believe it from what I just said, but check out this question that Stephen Hawking, the great physicist, asked. He says, do we really have reason to believe that an objective reality exists? What do physicists do? They observe objective reality, theoretically. and they discover what happens in the physical world, the objective physical world, right? Hawking is asking the question, do we even have any reason to believe that this physical, objective reality exists? You know what he says? What do you think he says? He says no. That's right. He says no, there is no model independent concept of reality. That's what he says. Now go back to what we talked about last night, the Roadrunner tactic, applying a claim to itself. If you apply that claim to itself, what do you get? You see, this is self-defeating. Is that concept of reality objective? Is it? It defeats itself. This also makes science impossible, because if there is no objective reality, what is the scientist trying to observe? See, science is a search for causes. And if there is no objective reality, or let me put it this way, science is a search for causes in objective reality. If there is no objective reality, what are we looking for? And if everything in our mind is the product of a previous natural cause, are we even reasoning, or are we just reacting? We're just chemicals. We're just molecules in motion. Remember we talked about this last night? Remember Kant said you can't know the real world? And we said the answer to that is, well then how do you know that about the real world? Well, you might as well just put Hawking in Kant's chair, because this is what Hawking's buying into. He's buying into Kant. That's why I said last night, if you can't understand Immanuel Kant, you can't understand modern philosophy, and now you can't understand Hawking unless you understand Kant. He's given up objective reality in order to say that there is no God, basically. That's what he gets to. That's where he's heading with this. I know this is kind of hard to believe when you think about it, but this is what a world-renowned physicist is saying. This is why Einstein said many years ago, he said, the man of science is a poor philosopher. The man of science is a poor philosopher. Hawking is a very poor philosopher. He's making